Over $185 billion. That's the amount of military aid that Europe and the US have combined to deliver to Ukraine so far, with close to another $100 billion still in the pipeline. That money has gone towards several causes, ranging from helping Ukraine rebuild parts of the country that have been decimated by Russian attacks, to providing funds for its much-needed public services. But the vast majority has gone toward the one thing that Ukraine needs more than anything else, if it's to finally repel Russian President Vladimir Putin's invading forces. Weapons. Lots of them, billions of dollars worth. In this video, we're going to analyze the power of the 12 strongest weapons the West has sent to Ukraine, as well as examine how Ukraine has been using them. Let's start with the weapon that's as American as apple pie, the Patriot missile system. The MIM-104 Patriot is America's primary missile and air defense system, and it's much older than many think. The concept for this system emerged in 1961, when it was known as the Army Air Defense System for the 1970s, or AADS-70s. Back then, the AADS-70s was conceptualized as a mobile air defense system that would replace the Hawk systems the US already had. A name change swiftly followed, with the AADS-70s being renamed the Surface-to-Air Missile Development, or SAM-D, in 1964. After a contractor was chosen and the system developed, SAM-D was first tested in 1969. 5 years later, the Department of Defense implemented a Track-Via-Missile, or TVM, guidance system into the SAM-D, leading to its rebranding into the Patriots that we know today. As for the system itself, it's gone through multiple revisions in the years since, though all share commonalities. Each Patriot is made up of 6 components: a launcher, radar set, power generator, control station, high-frequency antenna, and of course, its missiles. The missiles use the TVM guidance system during their terminal phase, which occurs as it's readying to strike a target, with the operator in the control station having first guided the missile in range of its target. Each missile carries a 198-pound high-explosive warhead and can fly for up to 43.4 miles, reaching an altitude of 14.9 miles as it blasts towards its target. Each missile can stay in the air for up to 3.5 minutes, with each Patriot launcher being capable of firing at least 4 of them simultaneously. Typically, a Patriot battery will include between 6 and 8 launching stations, creating a combined missile load of between 24 and 32. When it's in the air, a Patriot missile can reach speeds approaching Mach 10, more than fast enough to catch up to any Russian fighter jet and the vast majority of Putin's missiles. Ukraine has put the weapon to great use. Defense News reports that Ukraine has managed to intercept Russian Su-34 fighter jets from almost 100 miles away, as well as intercept missiles launched from around 130 miles away. As Ben Hodges, a retired 3-star US general, puts it, Patriot has proven to be a very reliable system. He also notes that Ukraine learned how to use the system extremely quickly, and perhaps more importantly, also understand how to employ it to great effect. In short, the 4 Patriot systems Ukraine have helped it to take out many of the aerial threats Russia has sent its way. But next up, we move a little closer to the ground to examine an artillery unit that's helped to keep Ukraine in the fight when faced with the overwhelming might of Russia's artillery system, the M777 howitzer. If we didn't have these weapons, we would have already lost the war, one Ukrainian soldier was quoted as saying in a piece published by Radio Free Europe over Russia's most commonly used artillery, allowing them to strike at range with minimal risk of return fire. The M777 is a 105mm caliber artillery system that requires a crew of 7 to operate and has a muzzle velocity of 2,713 feet per second. Depending on the rounds used, it has a firing range of between 15.3 and 18.6 miles, with the latter range being made possible by rocket-propelled shells. If Ukraine can get its hands on the Raytheon Bofors XM982 Excalibur shells, that range increases to 24.8 miles, thanks to the shell's built-in GPS-powered navigation system. The only real disadvantage of the M777 is its weight. Each unit comes in at around 5 tons, which is about as light as it gets for 155mm artillery, making the M777 a potential target for Russia given its lack of movability. Still, the M777 makes up for its slight disadvantage with supreme accuracy. Popular Mechanics points out that the M777's sights measure 6,400 mils around a circle, which is far superior to the 6,000 mils around a circle seen in the Soviet artillery systems Russia employs. Add to that a massive blast radius, each M777 shell devastates a 229-foot area upon impact, and you have an artillery system that gives Ukraine a defined advantage over Russia on the battlefield. That shouldn't come as much of a surprise when you realize that each of the system's shells weighs 100 pounds. As for how Ukraine has been using the M777, there are no innovative tricks at hand. The systems have served the precise purpose for which they're made, repelling Russian advances by targeting tanks and other heavy equipment. There have been statements by Ukrainians that their artillery has actually been the most important, not anti-tank weapons, claims Center for Strategic and International Studies senior advisor Mark F. Kansian, suggesting that the M777 has been vital for making any deployment area into a no-go territory for Russian troops. While the M777 has proven vital for keeping Russia at bay, how about we switch focus to a weapon that has a little more range? These missiles come from the United Kingdom and have a name that perfectly encapsulates the threat they pose: the Storm Shadows. Also known as scalp missiles, Storm Shadows are classified as long-range, deep-strike weapons that allow users to conduct pre-planned attacks against high-value targets. Each missile weighs about 2,866 pounds and can travel for over 155 miles after being launched from a plane, ship, or submarine. That puts them just behind the American-made ATACMS missiles, more on those later, and means they can fly for around 100 miles more than the HIMARS missiles Ukraine has received from the US. Each Storm Shadow is packed with an 881-pound high-explosive penetration warhead and is propelled by a turbojet system that allows it to reach a top speed of over 600 miles per hour. Each Storm Shadow also comes equipped with its own guidance system, with the missile flying at low altitudes initially to avoid detection by anti-air systems. As it approaches its target, it locks on using an infrared seeker before beginning a rapid climb. The higher altitude helps to make it more precise and increases its chances of hitting its target. Finally, there's the missile's delayed fuse. A Storm Shadow will penetrate its target first, with the delayed fuse detonating the missile's warhead soon after. As for how Ukraine has used these powerful missiles, it typically has one key target: Crimea. The former Ukrainian region, which was annexed by Russia in 2014, is home to the dreaded Black Sea Fleet that's supposed to provide Russia with a naval advantage in the Ukraine war. However, Putin's forces have failed to realize that advantage because Ukraine has used weapons like Storm Shadow to devastate the Black Sea Fleet. Army recognition says that Ukraine has already used Storm Shadows to destroy a pair of Rapucha-class Russian Navy ships, the Azov and the Yamal, while they were stationed in their berths in the Crimean port of Sevastopol. Ukraine also used a trio of Storm Shadows to decimate a Black Sea Fleet communications center stationed in the same port. There are only two drawbacks for Ukraine when using the Storm Shadows: numbers and limitations on use. Though the UK has provided a steady supply of the missiles, the fact that each one costs $1 million makes them cost-prohibitive. As for limitations, Storm Shadow is one of the few UK-provided weapons that the country still won't allow Ukraine to use inside Russian territory, yet. According to the TASS Russian news agency, the UK has given Ukraine the green light to use these missiles inside Russia as of September 12, 2024, though no public announcement is being planned, as that would be considered unnecessarily provocative. So it may not be long before we see Storm Shadows crossing the red line and being used in Russia. But for now, let's switch focus to a weapon that Ukraine has consistently used to devastating effect in its own territory: the Javelin. Ukraine has used the Javelin to take out everything from Russian tanks to armor. It's also one of the few weapons that Ukraine has in large supply. The West has provided 10,200 of these anti-tank systems as of January 2024. As for the weapon itself, it's an anti-tank guided missile launcher that has a range of about 1.5 miles and comes with fire-and-forget capabilities. That means the Ukrainian soldier only needs to point in the general direction of the target, pull the trigger, and then let the missile itself do most of the work. Better yet, the Javelin launcher is portable, with the system being mounted on the user's shoulder when firing and being light enough to carry around the battlefield so it can be fired from the most advantageous positions during an encounter. The Javelin first entered service in the US military in 1996 and stands out among anti-tank weapons because of its tandem-charge high-explosive warheads. Weighing 18.5 pounds, the warheads don't entirely detonate upon impact. Instead, the first warhead carries a shaped charge designed to take out a target's outer armor, such as destroying the thick metal shell of a tank. That leaves room for the second warhead to breach the gap, allowing it to explode inside the armor to kill any operators and decimate the target's internal systems. That capability has been a nightmare for Russian tanks, which have taken to installing makeshift cope cages over their turrets in the hopes that they'll protect the tank from the initial penetrative warhead blast. Those cope cages haven't worked. Javelin missiles are also so successful against tanks because they approach from the top down, targeting the weakest areas of the tank's armor. The missile is fast too, as it's capable of reaching speeds of 459 feet per second while reaching an altitude of 492 feet when used in top attack mode. The launcher also comes with a direct attack mode akin to a traditional rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Worst of all for Russia, it's about as rapid fire as an anti-tank system can get. It takes just 1 minute to reload a Javelin and have it acquire a new target. As for how Ukraine is using this weapon, most of the time its soldiers are sticking to the Javelin playbook and destroying scores of tanks with the missiles. However, Ukraine has also needed to be clever as it has limited supplies of these weapons. As National Interest points out, Ukraine spearheaded a strategy of using only 2 Javelins to destroy convoys, taking out the heads and tails of the convoys to leave the vehicles in the middle stuck. Those vehicles then become prime targets for artillery systems and drones, with the former being especially effective when targeting stationary targets. Next up, we move from an anti-tank weapon to another missile system designed to take out aerial threats. When Patriots aren't available for the task, Ukraine can call upon a short-range system to deal with incoming helicopters and low-flying planes, Starstreak. These UK-made missiles were among the first to be supplied to Ukraine when Russia invaded, with the Jamestown Foundation claiming that Ukraine had received 1,800 of them as of June 2024. Created by Thales, the Starstreak system is described as man-portable, though this doesn't mean it can be mounted to a shoulder and fired. Instead, the system is usually loaded onto an armored vehicle, which drives to wherever the threat appears so its missiles can deploy. The weapon was developed for use against low-flying threats, ranging from slow-moving missiles to attack helicopters and ground-attack fighter aircraft. As for the missiles being fired, each one contains a trio of tungsten darts, which are released from the Starstreak carrier and can each travel at speeds above Mach 3. Accuracy comes from Starstreak's laser-guided system, essentially allowing the operator to point and shoot while the missile handles the rest. In addition to that laser guidance system providing accuracy, it also makes the missile practically impossible to jam once airborne. According to Thales, this allows Starstreak to have a huge impact on the human consciousness of pilots. Translation: it destroys low-flying aircraft and the pilots inside before they know what's coming. Like with practically every weapon it's received from the West, Ukraine has used Starstreak missiles to great effect when taking out Russian helicopters and planes. One example comes from April 2022, just a couple of months into the war, as the BBC released footage showing a Starstreak missile sending an Mi-28 helicopter up, or rather down, in flames. The footage shows the missile striking the chopper's tail, setting it ablaze as the helicopter veers off course on its way to crash landing. The sheer speed is remarkable, and it's likely that the threat of Starstreak missiles in waiting is a large reason why Russia rarely provides its ground troops with chopper and fixed-wing aircraft support when trying to push into Ukraine. How about we move on to a weapon that has a little more range? We're talking about the only long-range missile Ukraine has that can travel even further than the Storm Shadow, the MGM Army Tactical Missile System, better known as ATACMS. It's unknown exactly how many ATACMS missiles Ukraine has, with the US keeping quiet when it comes to official numbers. However, Forbes suggests that Ukraine had received 20 of them in late 2023, followed by a second batch containing over 100 in early 2024. Each of those missiles is an absolute powerhouse, with a range of between 102 and 186 miles, depending on whether it's a Block 1 or a Block 1A variant. Each missile carries a single warhead weighing between 352 and a staggering 1,234 pounds, and those warheads can be swapped out depending on the purpose of the ATACMS. High explosive and blast fragmentation warheads are available, with the latter carrying between 300 and 950 submunitions that allow the missile to pepper a target with hundreds of smaller explosions. ATACMS is also a road mobile missile, meaning it can be launched from a vehicle and is classified as a surface-to-surface weapon. And that's precisely how Ukraine has been using these missiles. Like the Storm Shadow, the ATACMS has become a key part of Ukraine's strategy for taking out Russian assets in Crimea. Forbes reports that Ukraine has used these missiles to decimate Russian helicopters and air defense units stationed near the front lines, but their most important use has been in Crimea. In May 2024, Ukraine launched a volley of these missiles at the Belbek Air Base, which sits just outside Sevastopol, to destroy Su-27 fighter jets and MiG-31 interceptors. The move led to the destruction of a pair of S-400 launchers, along with a radar system, and damage to one MiG-31 and at least 3 Su-27s. Ukraine's use of ATACMS missiles has resulted in Russia pulling ships and warplanes further away from the front lines, a massive result for a country doing all it can to relieve the constant pressure Putin is attempting to place on it. Unfortunately for Ukraine, the only downside with the ATACMS system is that the US hasn't allowed it to use these missiles to strike Russia directly. Perhaps that permission will come. After all, we learned earlier that UK appears to be planning to allow Ukraine to use Storm Shadows in Russia. For now, let's switch focus to another US-provided missile system, HIMARS. Ukraine has received 39 high-mobility artillery rocket systems as of March 2024, with the majority of them still being intact. Forbes says Ukraine still has 98% of them, suggesting that it's only lost one in 2 years. Made by Lockheed Martin and BAE Systems, HIMARS is mounted on a wheeled chassis and offers multiple launch rocket system, or MLRS, capabilities. In other words, a single HIMARS system can rattle off multiple rockets at once. The system itself weighs 24,000 pounds and is crewed by 3 people. As for HIMARS rockets, they can reach a maximum range of 45 miles, reaching speeds of up to 53 miles per hour. So what's the big deal, you might think? HIMARS sounds like a slow, short-range system, so why is it one of the most powerful weapon systems provided to Ukraine? Part of the answer comes down to a single HIMARS system being able to fire 6 rockets simultaneously. So even if Russian defenses are able to track 1 or 2 of the rockets, that still leaves several more to penetrate defenses and strike a target. As for the other reason, it all comes down to how Ukraine is using its HIMARS. The system is among the world's most advanced forms of rocket artillery, meaning its range is actually impressive when compared to the artillery systems Russia has in the field. Ukraine has put that range to good use in the Donbass, where Putin has pushed to gain territory for much of 2023 and into 2024. The systems have been vital in helping Ukraine to take out Russian ammunition and supply depots. Their extended strike capabilities also played a huge role in helping Ukraine push Russia out of Kherson. Without the HIMARS, I don't think the Ukrainians would have liberated Kherson, claims Institute for the Study of War analyst George Barros. Add strikes against Russian infrastructure into the mix, and you get a weapon that's playing a key role in keeping Russian troops on the front lines understocked and poorly supported. While HIMARS rockets have allowed Ukraine to strike Russian positions at range, the country has also received 2 key types of tanks that have bolstered its defensive and offensive capabilities on the ground: the Challenger 2 and the M1 Abrams. Granted, it doesn't have many of either. The US has sent 31 of its M1 Abrams, while the UK delivered 14 of its Challenger 2s in January 2023. However, both rank among the best tanks in the world and are leagues ahead of the Soviet-era tanks Russia has resorted to using as its stockpiles run low. Both are considered main battle tanks, with each being crewed by 4 people: a commander, loader, gunner, and driver. The Challenger 2 first entered service in 1998, and it comes with a powerful L30 120mm smoothbore gun that's made from electroslag steel and insulated using a thermal sleeve. The tank can hold 50 120mm projectiles, with those rounds varying from fin-stabilized discarding sabot shells that pierce enemy tanks' armor to high-explosive squash head rounds. Add 10 L8 smoke grenade launchers, 5 on each side of the main turret, and a second-generation Cobham armor system that incorporates protection against nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, and you get a sturdy tank that's as capable of defending itself as it is attacking the enemy. Then there's the M1 Abrams. Weighing in at 68 tons and approved for production in 1990, the M1 Abrams is America's main battle tank and matches the Challenger 2 in several key areas. Beyond the 4-person crew, it also has a 120mm smoothbore gun that can fire different types of rounds, with that gun being accompanied by a 50 caliber machine gun and a 7.62 M240 coaxial machine gun. The tank can reach a maximum speed of 42 miles per hour and travel for 265 miles before refueling. It also incorporates an inter-vehicle information system, allowing the crew to constantly exchange information about the ever-changing battlefield with other vehicles. Together, the tanks represent a key double threat, though they have seen less use than you might expect in the Ukraine war. Part of the reason comes down to the very same issue Russia has faced when trying to use tanks against Ukraine. Drones and anti-tank weapons are capable of taking both of these Western tanks out. Still, as a Ukrainian soldier told Business Advisor in early 2024, the tanks still have their uses on the front lines, as they tend to come out on top in tank-to-tank battles against Russia. Those battles are simply becoming fewer and farther between. This is actually good news for Ukraine. It means its own anti-tank measures are working. And that brings us to the next Western weapon we're going to cover in the list: next-generation light anti-tank weapons, or NLAWs. Dubbed Ukraine's secret weapon by national interest, NLAWs are made by Saab and, similar to Javelins, are shoulder-mounted anti-tank weapons that can be carried practically anywhere on the battlefield. Their range isn't the most impressive in the world, topping out at 2,624 feet, but an NLAW rocket takes just 5 seconds to reach its target at that maximum range. Saab calls the weapon the ultimate tank killer because it's man-portable and its rockets can't be jammed by any system a tank might have. They're also fast to deploy, taking just 5 seconds for a soldier to mount, acquire a target, and fire. NLAWs even offer the soldier some top-down capabilities. They can be fired from elevated positions like trees and buildings at a 45-degree angle, and Ukraine has thousands of them. By May 2023, the UK had already delivered 5,000 NLAWs, 2,000 of which were already delivered in January of 2022, perhaps in anticipation of a Russian invasion. As for how Ukraine is using them, it turns out that the fairly short range of the NLAW is even a situational advantage. It can fire on a tank from as little as 65 feet away, with that ability to close distance allowing it to prevent tanks from simply storming into Ukrainian settlements and start firing on ground troops. NLAWs force Russia to reconsider how it uses its tanks, because it knows they're likely ready and waiting for it during any encounter on the ground, with Javelins also being able to fire on the tanks at greater distances. So the NLAW is one of the world's best tank busters, but it's another weapon the West has delivered that's proven surprisingly effective against tanks: Bradley fighting vehicles. Almost looking like mini tanks in their own right, Bradley fighting vehicles have a 3-person crew, though they're also capable of carrying a 6-person infantry squad. They're fast too, capable of zipping along the battlefield at 41 miles per hour, with their 300-mile range meaning they need to stop and refuel less often than tanks. As for weaponry, they carry M242 25mm chain guns and 7.62mm M240C machine guns. But the most powerful weapons in a Bradley, and one that Ukraine has used to great effect on several occasions, are its TOW anti-tank missiles. Each of those missiles has a range of 2.3 miles and is extremely effective against lightly armored targets, including tanks. Ukraine has so far received 300 of these vehicles from the United States, though roughly 90 of them have been lost. But don't let those losses fool you. The vehicle has proven invaluable for transporting troops to the front lines, as well as for taking out Russian tanks. How, you might ask, when it comes to the tank busting? The answer comes from an encounter a Bradley M2 driver had with a Russian T-80 tank in May 2024. An M2 driver spotted a T-80 tank about a mile away from his position in the Ukrainian village of Novopokrovska. Rather than call for backup, the vehicle's crew decided to take the tank out there and then. They loaded up a TOW missile and fired, taking out the 43-ton tank in an instant. It's been hailed as one of the longest-range direct kills of a tank in the war and led to Ukraine dubbing the Bradley the tank destroyer. And they're not wrong. Just a few months earlier, in January 2024, Ukrainian soldiers used a pair of Bradleys to strafe and ultimately destroy a T-90M tank near Avdiivka. For context, Putin has hailed the T-90M as the best tank in the world, meaning the fact that it can be taken out with a pair of armored vehicles casts a ton of doubt on the Russian president's claims. With that, we have only one more Western weapon to cover. A weapon for which Zelensky has clamored since the beginning of the Ukraine war, and one that finally arrived in Ukraine in the summer of 2024. We're talking, of course, about the F-16 fighter jet. At the time of the writing of this video, 85 F-16s have been committed to Ukraine by a coalition of European countries, though only 6 are in the country so far. Each of these multi-role fighter jets opens up options for Ukraine in terms of how it takes the aerial battle to Russia. An F-16 can fly up to 500 miles before needing to refuel and can reach speeds of up to Mach 2 when flying at altitude. Speaking of altitude, the jet has a 50,000-foot ceiling, which puts it well above most of Russia's jets it's likely to face in Ukraine. It's also packed with weapons: 2 AIM-9 missiles, a pair of AIM-120s, and 2 2,000-pound bombs that allow it to take out ground targets. As for how Ukraine is planning to use them, we got an early insight when Russia launched its largest missile and drone strike yet on August 26, 2024. Featuring over 100 missiles, along with a similar number of drones, the strike targeted Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa. And though it saw some success, Ukraine's first batch of F-16s played a key role in limiting the damage. They were deployed to take out as many Russian cruise missiles as possible during the strike, indicating that Ukraine will be using the F-16s to conduct aerial defense patrols, at least for the foreseeable future. That strategy may change when more jets arrive in Ukraine, but for now, the F-16 is going to play a key defensive role that may even free up other Ukrainian fighter jets to take more of an active role on the front. And with that, we conclude our power analysis of 12 of the best weapons the West has sent to Ukraine since February 2022. What do you think about these weapons and the roles they've played in helping Ukraine? And do you think there are other weapon systems that Ukraine could put to good use in its fight against Putin and his invading Russian forces? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you as always for watching the video. Now go and check out Analyzing the Power of Western Tanks in Ukraine, or click this other video instead.